I'm Scott Eckart, and this is Future Proof, a show for building something that lasts. Let's get into it. In this episode, I'm joined by Katie Ittenbach and her father, Jim Ittenbach. Katie is the CEO and owner of SMARI Research, located here in Indianapolis, Indiana. SMARI was founded in 1983 by Jim, and they have completed a very successful transition plan that you'll hear all about.
I gave her the account manager job, and I said, and here's your salary. She goes, no, that's not good enough. I know what I'm bringing into this company. I know what value I'm bringing. That proved to me that she was ready for it. And that's when I said, I need to fast track you because I don't have time to wait for you to put 20 years in to take over the company. You got to do it in 10.
Today, we will hear from both Jim and Katie on the process of changing leadership from one generation to the next and what success looks like from father to daughter.
I love when people underestimate me. Being a woman, being a younger woman, always trying to act older. And if I come in with a male counterpart, they always look for the male. So I always thought it was a personal challenge to make them shift and then have that respect.
I have two very special people in the studio today. I want to welcome Jim and Katie Ittenbach. I've got Jim, who is the founder of SMARI Research, and his daughter, Katie Ittenbach, who is the current CEO. The reason that I wanted you here to tell your story is because of a very successful succession story. When I first met Katie in our business development group, I was very taken with you and the story and what you're doing. And so, Katie, I want to start with you. So you do really cool stuff in your company. And could you tell us about SMARI?
Sure. I mean, I like to think it's cool. So we do primary market research. In essence, that is getting into the minds of consumers for different brands. So when clients have a question of what does our customer think? What do they want? Do they like this product? Do they like this ad? This is where we can come in and help solve those problems.
So I think of focus group, which is something you do, but it's really more than that, right?
Yeah, I would say focus groups and surveys, those are the tools of market research. We take it a little step further, probably the more complicated problems where they really need strategy to help define how do we solve this problem? What does it mean? And then what do we do with that data once we have it?
Okay. At what point did you start working for your dad?
Immediately, right after college.
She graduated on a Saturday, and I said, you start Monday morning.
Oh my, really? It was that far back? Okay. What did you study?
I went to Purdue with a management degree, marketing minor, and then I also went to Ball State for my master's.
Okay. So then he actually said, do you want to work for me? Or how did that go? Was it like over Thanksgiving or, I mean, tell me.
I went to Purdue, focused on science, and I was undecided for 2 years until my advisor said, hey, you're going to be a junior. You have to choose. So that's honestly why I chose management, because I was like, I have no idea what I want to do, but that sounds pretty general, right? Well, what happened is I graduated 2008. Not a great time to graduate with a generic degree and no experience. So I kind of tapped my dad on the shoulder and said, hey, I did do an internship with you. Can I help you guys out? Maybe get that resume builder, put a couple years experience on the resume, and then also figure out what I want to do. So it was a complete accident. I didn't mean to stay in the company.
No, you were the last person I thought would actually come work for me.
Okay, because there are siblings. Did you ever see yourself as a business owner? Did you ever think about what that would be like?
Actually, no. And it's strange because I still don't see myself as an entrepreneur and business owner because I didn't start the company. So I'm like, oh, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not as risky. And I think I've even said this to you. I'm like, I'm risk adverse. And you're like, no, you're not. You own a company. Yeah. And it is that. I'm just like, well, I guess you're right. So I still don't even identify with that. It's just I'm doing it.
Okay. All right. But you did get the gene clearly. So, Jim, let's go back in time then a little bit. So you have Katie, she's 2008. There's this thing. What were you thinking when she said, can I come help out?
That is an interesting time in our evolution because what she didn't tell you is why she picked the degree of management. And I said, well, why do you want to get into business and why management? She says, because I realized that I don't like to follow, so I might as well learn how to lead. I said, okay. And that's when I said, well, if you're going to go into business, maybe you ought to try it out.
Okay.
That was her internship. And at the end of her internship, she said, I kind of like this stuff. Would you mind if I went and started out working for you upon graduation? And that was my response. You heard is, no problem. You start Monday morning. Her focus was in science. She was a biochem major and straight A's.
Yeah.
And so when she said, I don't want to do this anymore, I go, you're getting straight A's. And she goes, well, that's because it was easy. And I go, that may be an indication of acumen, and you have never taken a business course. But she proved me wrong. The one thing that I did notice is during her internship, she seemed to get the essence of who we are and what we're trying to
Okay.
produce.
Okay.
And with that kind of innate ability to understand and complement that process, it just seemed like it was a well worth venture for both of us.
Not exactly a happy accident, but a very great timing, I think, all the way around. So, Jim, let's go back even a little bit more. I want to go back to the beginning of SMARI because I find this to me, a very fascinating story. You were walking across campus, you had an idea. Let's go back in time. Tell us about that.
Well, when I was in my prior job, I was doing market research for another organization, and we were delivering data. And I realized that the people who were receiving the data, particularly the local organizations like Indiana National Bank, Indianapolis Power and Light, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Indiana, they weren't looking for just data. They were looking for, so why should I pay attention to this? What do I do with it? So I started providing data to local companies, but I would also provide an interpretive summary. This is what's important, and this is what I think you got to pay attention to, and this is what I think you should actually do with it. And they kind of liked that. The owner of the company didn't like the fact that I was straying from the core business product. So they said, we will not support this. So I said, well, then I got to go. So I left. But when I left, I started working for the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, being a cradle Catholic, as a development director, which was interesting because I never raised anything more than my paycheck. So here I got to raise $2.5 million for the Archbishop. But my clients started giving me a call. They said, would you mind, we can't get the interpretive doing some stuff for us. So I started doing it. And then my brother, John, the lawyer, said, you can't do this through your personal paycheck. You're going to get indicted.
Okay. Oh, no.
Oh, that is not cool. We got to figure this out. And as I was walking across campus working on my MBA at Indiana Central,
Okay.
my brother said, what do you want to call it? And I said, well, call it Strategic Marketing Research. Sounds good to me.
SMARI. There we go.
Well, that was the SMRI
Right.
back then. And he goes, no, you can't do that. Somebody's already got it. And I
Oh,
said, well,
boy.
how about strategic marketing and research? And he goes, that'll work.
I love that. So then what happened? You had a few people come back to you and say, we love the interpretive stuff. So what came next for you?
Well, it seemed like my side hustle or gig, as they call it today, started making more money than my primary job. So I decided that, well, maybe I ought to open up an office. So I ended up getting an office down at 1800 North Meridian, which was 4 blocks from where my day job was, and ended up with 10 employees. And I would go into my morning office. Archdiocese doesn't start till after Mass in the morning, so 9 o'clock. So
Got it.
between 7 and 9, I could work there. They take 2-hour lunches, so between 11 and 1, I could go back there and work. And they shut down at 4 to go say Mass, so I could go work from 4 till 7. So I was able to do both jobs until 2 years later, and I ended up having 30 employees and moved my office to Lockerbie Marketplace.
And that's when you knew that this thing had caught enough steam and enough momentum that it was a thing.
It was a full-time gig.
Okay.
I was actually making money and doing more with it than just funding the next project, accounts receivable,
Okay.
and funding accounts payable, and actually had enough money that I could probably take the risk of starting the business and moving forward with it.
Okay. So one of the things that Future Proof is known for is thinking down the road. Was there anything that, as you look back on it now, you had a pivot point a point of inflection, either growth or taking on a partner or anything that was either change or die kind of a thing? Were there any points like that for you, Jim, that were pretty important moments in the life of SMARI?
There was. I would write proposals, and you hope to close some of them. I wrote a dozen proposals, and I closed 11 of them. And that's when I said, how am I going to get this done? This is like big time. And I had to suddenly figure out, do I really want to pivot into making this work? But to do that, I got to take on all kinds of risk. I got to go to a bank. I got to get a line of credit. I got to leverage my house and my kids to finance funding this whole process. And I need help. And I can't get help at this level unless I offer them a piece of the pie. So
Okay.
I had to take on some members, partners, and kind of move forward with it. And then it became real because the obligation with your personal guarantee and all the loans makes it really really a real thing.
Yeah, and talk about risk, right? How did that turn out?
It was the motivating factor to me. I mean, when you got your name on 5-year leases that
Mhm.
you owe $150,000 on, a $50,000 line of credit. So suddenly I got 200 and plus debt, which is 3-4 times my annual salary at the time. And if I screw up, my kids are going to be on the street. I got to make it work. There
Right.
is no plan B. I will
Right.
do whatever it takes to make this thing work. And that was the motivation to always spend the extra hours, because I've always said you will work harder for yourself than you will anybody else.
That's right.
So you got to feel it inside that want to make it work, and you got to have the ability to do so.
So that risk reward formula, so you as an entrepreneur, you as a business owner, was that worth it?
For me personally, it was a win-win, only because I never did it for the money. I did it because I actually loved what I was doing and loved delivering what I was delivering. That was a meaningful outcome to my clients. So I turned out to be a TGIM. Thank God it's Monday and I get to go to work.
I don't know that I've ever heard that before. I've heard people talk about putting the love back in Monday, right? Because I think that's a very much of a paradigm shift. But I prefer your phrase. Great deal.
Yeah.
So
It was just a place where I could actually feel great about what I was doing. So it
Mhm.
wasn't a job, it was an enjoyment. And the clients resonated with it, and the money always was there.
yeah. So when you delivered these results, you saw companies being able to change, grow, and pivot themselves based on the information that you were able to glean for them. Is
Yeah.
that what you're saying?
Yeah, I realized straight on that my clients were the ones who came to me when they knew two things. I got a problem and I don't know exactly how to figure it out, or I see an opportunity but I don't know exactly how to make it work. So it's my job to find the answer to that mystery. And I would do it through not just primary research and data, but the analytic interpretations where we were able to use applied statistics
Okay.
in a manner that we could discover what were the unique elements. It wasn't a linear opportunity. It was a hybrid of 4 or 5 data points that would converge. And in that interpretation, you could say, here's what's important and why I think you ought to pay attention to it. But more importantly, here's an opportunity, or here's how you best position yourself to create that intrinsic value in your brand proposition.
So, Katie, was that at the internship that you kind of began to see the unique value prop of the company? Do you remember maybe an aha moment for where SMARI captured your heart and your mind?
I would say it wasn't in the internship. I think I was just trying to actually prove myself that I wasn't just, the daddy's daughter princess coming in that
Right.
no one expected to actually work, and I actually did. I think it was probably about a year in, where I knew enough. I was learning what we did, but then I actually was able to see the difference of, well, this is what other research looks like, and this is what we're doing, and that we are doing something different. So it took a little bit longer.
Very interesting. So, Jim, along the way, then, obviously, you're very good at spotting talent. So, let's talk a little bit about how you do that.
It is extremely difficult to capture someone who not only wants to do the job you asked them to do, but wants to bring more to the table.
Mhm.
And I always say when I hire someone, I hope that within the first 6 months they can figure out who we are, what we do, and how to make it work. And somewhere after that, those who want to do more than just deliver and the job that you ask them to do will self-identify. And when they self-identify by doing a bit more, by taking risk in their own work, it's my job to acknowledge it, affirm it, and empower it, and encourage it, and reward it. And they will respond accordingly. So it's paying attention to how they're doing their work and what they're doing, but when they go beyond just delivering a good job. No offense, a lot of people just want to really do a good job, and you acknowledge that. But when they try to do the work of the person they're reporting to, that's when you know they're different.
There's an interesting transition then for Katie. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that she's the boss's daughter, which is, I think, an uphill battle. A lot of bosses would say, hey, go find your own way for 3 to 5 years, come back. And sometimes you're almost harder on your own kid. I mean, I've seen that in the companies that I've worked with. But there's a really interesting thing that happens. So share with us how that went down.
Oh, well, much to Katie's chagrin, I started her at the lowest level in the company,
Okay.
except she said, I am not going to be an interviewer and work in the phone center. So she started out as a junior project manager.
To be clear, I was also really bad at it. Not everybody's good at all the market research jobs. I was not a good interviewer.
But so she started out at the lowest level with the average salary, and she was on the other side of the business working in a booth.
Okay.
She did her job,
Yeah.
and I didn't get any complaints. She came to me and said, how do you get promoted? And I said, you'll get promoted when you start doing the job you think you need to be promoted to.
Okay.
And when you can prove to me that you can do it, well, then I'll let you have the job. But I don't want to take a risk just because you say you can.
So what was the next job, Katie?
So I started as a research specialist, right?
Project manager. You
Project
call it a
manager.
specialist.
Small company. So,
Mhm.
there's a couple different hats that was underneath that label. But the next job would have been research analyst. So really actually starting to do the advanced statistics, the analytics, writing the reports.
And how long was that?
Before I got to analyst?
Yeah, no, when you started kind of taking on the more responsibility and showing the old man.
Oh, I actually wrote my first report in 2 months. And that's just because my boss at the time had a lot on her plate and she couldn't get to it. So I just started writing the report.
So next steps. Then you said, Dad, I did this, or did he notice?
I don't know. Did you notice? I was kind of in my own world because we didn't really work directly for years.
I didn't notice up front because obviously she was doing the work of her boss and her boss didn't tell me. So it just flowed through it.
Okay.
But she kept showing up for work and she was happy. And I typically use the annual review process to figure out where she was in her own head.
Okay.
Because she would come in and I said, you always have to understand how this gig works. I need to make more money off of you than you cost me. So your value has to exceed your cost.
And this is your own daughter. And this is where we're in a business. And this is something that some of my clients whose children work for them will not say.
You did not have a problem with this.
Right?
No.
So if there's any parents out there that have their kids in there, you got to say this. I think it's probably the most loving thing that somebody could say, because otherwise you're really not helping. And you would say that to any of your workers because you want to say, look, I believe in you. You might think I'm being hard on you, but I actually do it because there's a huge amount of belief. But I don't think that people sometimes actually hear that. And what's really cool about this is that I can look across the table and see this story turned out really well. But sometimes it doesn't. And the work I do in family business, sometimes people get their feelings hurt and they say, Dad's being mean to me. And I just want to get stuff and I don't really want to work for it. So this is not how that went down. Now, Jim, at the same time, though, at some point you're thinking about, I don't necessarily want to be doing this until I'm 99. When did you start thinking about succession?
It was in that era. I mean, I was nearly 40 when she came about, and I actually did retire on my 70th birthday. So when Katie started, she had two mantras. One, when you start doing the work of the next level job, you'll get rewarded with
Okay.
it. And two, as long as I'm making more money off of you than you're costing me, then you can get more money. So every time she would come in for a review and I would promote her to another job and hand her new salary, she would always go, "Wow, thanks, Dad. I appreciate that." Until she said she wanted to be an account manager. So I gave her the account manager job and I said, "And here's your salary." She goes, "No." I went, "What do you mean, no?" She goes, "That's not good enough. I know what I'm bringing into this company. I know what value I'm bringing, and that doesn't justify what I'm bringing."
And Katie, you said that.
I did.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's when I knew two things. One, she understood her value.
Okay.
She understood the contribution she was making to the company, and she was ready to lead and take over.
Okay. And that wasn't any kind of a trap, or it was just, that's just how the conversation went, right?
Yeah. That proved to me that she was ready for it.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, I need to fast track you
Okay.
because I don't have time to wait for you to put 20 years in to take
Yeah.
over the company. You got to do it in
Yeah.
10.
So time collapsed at that point. And how proud were you of your daughter at that moment?
I think I was more pleased than I was proud.
Okay.
I was more pleased with her
Mhm.
and her accomplishments. So I guess that the pride was through her as
Sure.
opposed for her.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take credit for it because she earned it all on her own. Because she was working for me 50, 60 hours a week and got her MBA in 3.5 years on top of that. So she put in the time and put in the effort. And it was just me more of acknowledging her than being proud of her, if that makes sense to you.
No, it does. But you also provided the space, the opportunity, and I would say the belief, because I'm here to tell you that I work a lot in family business, and sometimes the belief isn't there. And without that, it doesn't happen.
I think something else that was important that he did that he may not have realized is up until that point, that's probably about 5 years into my career, he managed me like I wasn't taking over the business. That
Okay.
still wasn't even on the table. I don't think that was really a thought. And he managed me like, you can walk away tomorrow. I wasn't the only solution that he had. So he wasn't afraid to say, work harder or do this differently, or this is what you're going to make, or you're starting at the bottom. And I think that might be some of the, if parents are afraid to tell their kids the hard things, are they afraid they're going to, is this their last resort? I don't think you ever thought of me or had that as like, this is the only plan. This is the only option. The pressure's there. You have to take this over.
No, it was just the opposite. She never came into the business knowing that she was the heir apparent. And I never hinted that she was the heir apparent until I made her president.
Which is a gift. You have allowed Katie to flourish in a way that she couldn't have otherwise. So Katie, as you came in every day, was he your dad or was he your boss? Was he both?
That is interesting because I want to say he's both, but there was very clear definitions of this is my boss. So if we're in meetings, the number one thing that I think we learned early is I never spoke to him like he was my dad. And if he said something I disagreed with, it was never spoke about in a public situation. That would have been for later or another time. So there's never an undermining authority.
Right.
And that we were, I think, pretty
either
cautious
side.
of that. Yeah, on both sides. You didn't treat me like a daughter in front of people. And actually, you probably treated me a little harsher, but that's.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have rules of engagement? Did you come to them formally or informally in terms of how you treated one another in
I
public?
feel like it evolved organically, informally. Like I call him Jim at work. It was always Jim. I never called you dad. I probably do now, but I retired. And yeah, we're past that. But I think it was just an organic, just a mutual respect that, and I think that that's leadership too. So if your co-partner's running a company and you disagree, you don't do that in front of your employees.
Sure.
You do that later anyway. So it was almost like that from the beginning. You just don't do that because this is a company, it's professional space, and leadership always needs to look aligned. And not that I was leadership by any means, but obviously with a personal connection, you have to put that away.
So did you ever pick up on clients thinking, oh, it's Jim's daughter? I mean, did you ever get any of that
She
from
never
anybody?
revealed it.
So I was able to hide behind a different name. I do think some clients knew, but I always have felt like I love when people underestimate me. Being a woman, being a younger woman, always trying to act older. And if I come in with a male counterpart, they always look for the male. And it's human nature. I'm not blaming, but
No, but
I love when people do
underestimate
that
Katie Ittenbach.
because then,
Here to tell
once you start talking, I love to see the shift. So I always thought it was a personal challenge to make them shift and then have that respect.
In terms of the team that you've built, it's been a real privilege to spend time with your team and looking at that. It's very exciting to see where things are going. How have you spotted the talent that you currently have? Because you and I have talked about that a fair bit.
Yes, I think we have the best team I have ever seen through SMARI. And I say that authentically. It is just a sharp team. And I have now come to realize that there's two sides of a person that makes them successful, because we have had some very intelligent, smart people come into this company that haven't worked. And there's a cultural alignment. And where we thrive is, we're a very flat structure. We're a small company. People win by taking jobs and volunteering and stepping into things and stepping into scary spaces. And, we say, go for it. That's the advantage of small business. But they have a culture of what we kind of term the grittiness and the curiosity. And really, it's more of how do we give the best answers for the client and really get dedicated to that outcome. And if they really have a passion and love the research, they thrive. Plus, they're intelligent people. But you can be intelligent and really skilled at research and not do well in our company.
So, Katie, continuing on with your progression at SMARI. So you have this great conversation, and Jim begins to reveal he's ready to make you president. What'd you think?
So I don't know if it was a single conversation. I'm trying to remember, when was this final conversation and when did it happen? And I don't know if it was like a single conversation. I think I just started to see there was different potential in the company, right? And at this point, the company was 30 years old and it needed some new life put into it. Companies need to constantly change and evolve. And this is the second generation of a company. And we needed small things like we need a better website. It was horrible at that time. So I was like, well, let's just we probably need someone with a website. And of course, you were like, go for it.
Go do it.
Well, okay, so I'll go do that. I'm an analyst at this point, but sure, yeah, that'll be fun. And then I was like, we should probably rebrand. Strategic Marketing and Research Incorporate. It's a mouthful. Maybe we should just own SMARI because clients call us. So it was just small things. And I was like, we probably need to change our culture and we need to do some different things. And then we moved into a new office building, and that created a very big shift in a new culture. And this is when, millennials were coming into the workforce more predominantly, and open spaces and collaboration. And, that office at the time was a bunch of private offices and everybody shut their door. So going into an office where there was clear opening, it was just a very big difference. And this was before I was president. So I think it was an evolution. Like Jim just mentioned, it's taking on the job before you get the job. So I think I started just being kind of an acting president,
Okay.
and then there became an
But he's
official.
still around at this point.
Very
Oh,
much
yeah.
so,
Okay.
yes.
What she's not telling you is when we were moving our offices, and she said, you need to rethink collaboration. I said, okay, as I normally do, go do it. So she actually redesigned the entire office herself. And the key to it is, as the owner, I have to remember two things. One, she's going to do it very differently than me.
Mm.
The outcome will be very different than I would imagine, but I got to let her do it her way and give her the opportunity to fail as well as to succeed.
Okay. So she succeeded again and again. And then there was a bit of with at least one person maybe who was not very happy with you ascending to the throne, as it were. Then you were president at some point officially. So talk about that.
Yeah, and I think whenever someone new comes into a company, whether it's second generation, whether it's just a new CEO, new leadership, and you see this trend, they hire their team. And I think there's a cultural match with how someone leads and who meshes well with their style. And the way that we positioned the office was very different. So if you're used to a private office with a door your entire career, and all of a sudden now there's windows, there's no privacy, it's open, that's a very big difference if you've been doing this for decades. And it just was a very different style, different collaboration. That was actually the next year we won Best Places to Work in Indiana because we were very culture focused. But that was a 180 from the traditional kind of style that we were. Not everybody's going to be on board with that. And that's okay. I think that's where you have to be willing to say, we're going to change. You can change with us or pursue your own path. And there's no right or wrong in that, but not everybody's going to stay.
So now you're at the helm. How does it feel?
Lonely. I would say that's the biggest thing, right? Everybody says that. It's lonely at the top. And it wasn't initially. You're still in the company. We were running this in co-partnership, and then you started to phase out. Now that you're officially retired, there's a lot of just big decisions that you make, and there's not a lot of people to back you up and say, yeah, go for it, don't do it. Here's your guardrails. It's you.
One of our priorities for Future Proof is that you do collaborate and that you do have a group around you and feedback is a gift and, wisdom around you. What are things that both of you would tell people as leaders of organizations that they should do? Jim, I'll start with you.
Presidents and CEOs pretty much know how to make money. They know how to sell. They know how to strategize. They know how to run their business. But what they don't always know is how to avoid mistakes.
Okay.
They don't always have someone that says, have you thought this through? You really think that's a good idea? You may want to think about this. Or someone that blatantly says, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You do that, you're going to lose money. And challenge you. In a small business, you don't have staff who are willing to say, that's the dumbest thing you should do. So I really think that being able to create or foster the contrarian voice and welcome the contrarian voice is an essence that you have to have in somehow going through it.
So, Katie, what have you done in terms of getting some help along the way and to not be lonely at the top as CEO now?
I think joining groups where you have like peers, hiring individuals like yourself that can help kind of guide you in areas that you're not an expertise. And I think that's, recognizing where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are, and getting an advisory support around you, having good mentors, people that have been at that level, share the same problems, have been through it, and just a sounding board. Sometimes it's just, how's business going? How's this year going for you? And having those types of conversations, it helps.
So one of the things I really admire about you is that you're confident and not arrogant because, you don't walk around and say, oh, I'm CEO, I'm president. And you have, I think, a great sense of yourself and, just who you are and confident. And one thing I've learned about your process is that when you market and you sell, but you also do the work. And I think that's part of your superpower. So maybe talk a little bit more about your engagement with your clients as CEO, right?
Yes, I have tried to pull myself out of the work because that's like the number one thing that people will tell you. If you want to grow, you've got to get out of the day-to-day. And I can't do it because I love the research. I love the work. I love working with clients. I'm always curious. If someone is working on a project, I can't help but ask, so what did you find? What was it? How did you answer the question? It's just part of who we are, which is why we will stay a kind of boutique consulting agency because you get to stay close to it.
Well, and I know too that the work that you've done when other CEOs leave and go to other companies, they actually call you back and they say, hey, I'm somewhere new. Tell me about that.
Yeah, there's no better place to be than on the CEO's team. And the CEO that will go in, their job is typically to go into a company, run it, fix it, grow it, and then they find their next company to go into. And if you're part of that team, it's great. You can see this team shift with them with every company that they go. And they're visionaries, the game changers, the strategists, and they want data to back that up, and you get to be part of that strategy.
So as we think about the future now, we've got AI, we've got all these things, but what are you most excited about as you now look at the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
So I would say probably two things. One is giving myself the permission to be the consultant beyond just the data. This is something that I've been in research for about 18 years now, and we get the advantage of seeing, clients come to us when they need to fix something. So we see the problem before, we see the problem after, we get to see how the company evolves. And we've done that hundreds of times. So you see a lot of things in that time period where we can consult beyond the data. And I think I've always been, well, I'm the researcher. This is my position. This is my lane. I give you the data, the insights, and then you go and do it. But I'm finding that clients are like, what would you do? And they're asking for more questions, and giving myself the permission to be that consultant beyond that is exciting. It's like the next challenge, the next step, the next level up. I think it can be the next level up for the company. The second thing I'm excited about actually is AI. Data is everywhere, and now you can just go to ChatGPT and ask questions. And there is a careful kind of guardrails that need to be put on it. ChatGPT is great. I use it every day. I'm not going to say I don't use it, but it does need its guardrails of still the strategy and picking what applies, what doesn't apply. It's a great tool, but I'm seeing how we're advancing to where it can be plugged into research. And I'm like, this isn't our enemy. This needs to be our best friend. Because there's AI that's actually built off of primary research data. So it's actually your own data that you pay for. It's not the sea of sameness. Everybody has the same data through ChatGPT, but this is different because it's built off the research, like something that we would do. But then it makes it more accessible for an entire organization, because research can be difficult to understand if you're on a product team and you don't deal with this. But AI can make that accessible. So there's some fun things coming out. And I think that's the next adventure, is how do we be best friends with some of these new technologies
And not be afraid of
and
it.
definitely not be afraid of it, because you're going to have to change.
Yeah.
If you're trying to avoid it, that's the next.
So that's going to be a pivot.
Yeah, that's a pivot.
For SMARI for sure.
Yeah, we're in
To
it
be
now.
a gateway for that and say, hey, we got this.
Yep.
We can help you. Very good. One of the other things that I see you doing too is keeping the human dynamic in research. Whereas I think people want to automate. They think they can save money. Why is that not a good idea?
I think there is a good place for DIY research. There's quick research. People need answers. And I always say some research is better than no research. But there also are questions. You know, a lot of times when clients come to us, they are giving us a question that isn't really what they need to solve for. It's, hey, how do we test this new content because we're seeing sales drop? I'm like, let's go back. When did sales start dropping? What happened? And let's actually not test content to try to fix that and see if it works. Let's figure out why your sales are dropping and why people left and what competition they're doing. And let's go backwards. So if you just went and tested some content, you really wouldn't be solving for the right problem. You're just throwing money away. Whereas if you go back to this root problem, solve that, you never have to test content again, because now you know what you need to say. So I think that's some of the difference. Is it's good for the quick things, but you risk asking the wrong questions.
We also talked a little bit before about education, and I think that there's so much that you can teach us. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you're educating folks before you even would sell them or do anything like that?
Yes, and this is something I picked up from you, Scott, because you came into our company to help. You know, it's just as part of growing culture, and if people are happy, if they're financially happy, personally happy, and happy at work. And you gave kind of a lunch and learn about just finances, kind of 101 with investing and your triangle and all the fun stuff that you do. And people loved it. And it wasn't sales, it was just authentic learning training. And you know, picking that up, I'm seeing that, you know, we work a lot of times with people that know research, right? They're vice president of marketing that came from a research background, or they're vice president of insights. They know it. But what I see them struggling with is, how do I get people in the wider, this huge organization to all now be on the same page with research when they don't even understand what it is? So we're showing them these strategy decks, and they're like, who did we talk to and why, and what am I even looking at? You know, going in and using the same technique of, how do we just help our product work better for you, and just give you teaching. So, you know, here's what research is. This is why you do it. These are the questions you ask. This is when you should do it and when you shouldn't do it. And just helping these organizations learn about research, because it's not something that everybody knows about. It's kind of the behind the scenes things that happen, and everybody knows what marketing is, but they don't know the research that drove that market creation. So it's kind of it's not an easy concept to grasp.
Okay. I know that you have your own succession plan, which, you know, we've talked about already. And of course, it's never too early to think about that. But while we have this guru in the room with us, so far then, what things have you learned from Jim, Dad?
I think the number one thing is work ethic. So I think, he mentioned working hard and working the two jobs and balancing when he first started the company, but I still think that undermines the degree of work that he put in behind the scenes on Sundays, at night after we went to bed. I know these stories of really getting this company done, but that work ethic, and my mom too, I had dual working parents, modeling that work ethic is, I think, just that's where I am today, is having that same work ethic. The other big thing that I've learned that's probably more leadership based is I will never ask someone to do something that I won't do myself. If we have the late night focus groups, I'll be the one that takes the last group. And that was modeled after his leadership. He's not too good for anything. He's putting in the work. He's right alongside you. You're not just handing it off. And I think that gives you respect as a leader. So modeled that. The other big one that I've really paid attention to that keeps ringing true, and I remind myself, is he told me you can do one thing great, two things well, and three things
Mediocre.
We use our own choice words. So that can be, you have family, you have work, you have friends, hobbies, religion. There's all these different priorities that pull on you, but you have to be realistic about what you can handle and put in front of yourself.
And not to make too big or too little of a point with it. But SMARI is a woman-owned business. This is very exciting. And you are registered as that, I believe, right?
Yes, yep.
How has that gone for you?
It's been fun. So that's recent. That was as of 2023. And I wouldn't say we've done a lot to leverage it for sales, but it's been symbolic in the company. We have actually a large team of women, and I feel like it's created this little camaraderie with the group that we have. And I'm just a firm believer of women supporting women. I think, there's a lot of prior generation, there's the queen bee syndrome, only one woman at the top and women pushing each other down. But I do think we're getting to be a better generation about supporting each other and, leaning in and raising each other up.
Jim, as you think about your contemporaries now, you've known a lot of folks, business owners whose transition has not gone according to plan or maybe the way they wanted. If you think about folks that are maybe where you were 10 years ago, perhaps, or thinking about their succession, what thoughts, advice, ideas do you have for them now?
Oh, I've seen as many failures to transition as successes in my own peer group. And there's the three things that you have to go into it knowing. Is one, you're going to go from relevancy to not being relevant.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of people said, this is my company, I built it. I can't let go of it. I want to hang on to the power and the prestige and the benefits. And if you do that, then you're going to end up being 75 years old and a health issue will take you out. You won't have a choice. So you have to prepare yourself to let go. And when you can accept that, then you can begin to think about passing it on. The second point you have to understand is whoever you give it to is going to do it differently. Mm-hmm. And you got to be okay with that. Just because they have a different idea, a different plan, or different outcome, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's different.
Our conversation really speaks to what this show is all about. The moments that reshape your business, the action and the mindset it takes to keep moving forward. So, here are three things that stood out to me from my conversation with Jim and Katie as we look at how to future-proof your business. And the first one is from Katie. Let people know when you're ready. And one way to put that is, if you have the heart, you have the job. And one of the things that Katie would tell you is that go to your leaders when you are ready for your next position and say, I am ready. The next one is from Jim, and he would tell you to not be shy. You have not because you ask not. So if you are ready to move ahead, you really need to make your intentions clear. And the third one is from the father and daughter duo. Being father and daughter in a family business or father and son isn't enough. You have to remember that you are in a professional business, you must be seen as that way, and you must treat each other that way with respect and understanding that people may see you as having it easy, but actually it's harder. So father and daughter is not enough. You must be professional as president, vice president, or whatever the positions are. But keep in mind, you must be professional even though you are family. Head to the description of this episode to find links to connect with Katie and the SMARI team. The future is bright. I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening today. If you like what you've heard, please join us in the Velocity Network and sign up at www.velocoaches.com, which is a gathering of entrepreneurs, business owners, and people who desire to learn more about running and owning a business. Also, you can subscribe to Future Proof on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts.